असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमय ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Namaste and welcome to this 5-session series on fundamentals of Vedanta. Today we are going to discuss what is Vedanta. Vedanta is the essence of the Vedas. What are the Vedas? The Vedas are compendiums of knowledge. Let me put it in Vivekananda's words. Vedas, by the Vedas, no books are meant, but they are the treasury of spiritual laws discovered by different persons at different times. Elsewhere he says, the Vedas are actually the accumulated treasury of spiritual knowledge. The Vedas are actually compendiums of knowledge. So the Vedas come from the dhatu vid, which means to know. And they are the eternal laws of, spiritual laws of this universe, which were revealed in the minds of sages. In illumined minds, the divine revelations of these minds, these constitute what we call the Vedas. So not that the Vedas, somebody sat and wrote them, but they were revelations born in the minds of sages. And because they are revelations, the Vedas are considered apaurushaya, which means not created by the human mind. They are not creations or thought constructs. They are divine revelations which come into the minds of illumined sages. They are born of intuition, not of thought. So these came into the minds of rishis, and later on, much later, they were compiled together into the 4 Vedas. Who's a rishi? A rishi is a mantra drashta, or a seer of supersensory truth, one to whom the Vedas are revealed, knowledge is revealed, the eternal laws of the universe are revealed. He is a rishi. What is the difference between a philosopher and a rishi? A philosopher is one who knows by thinking, but a rishi is one who knows by intuition, by meditation. So this is the difference between a rishi, a knower of these truths, and a mere philosopher. These Vedas are very old. In fact, Indian scholars place the Rig Veda Samhita at 3000 BCE, which means more than 5000 years old. So these are very old scriptures, but the subject matter they deal with is very contemporary. What is the subject matter of the Vedas? The Vedas, and especially the Vedanta, the essence of the Vedas, is actually discussing consciousness. It is actually discussing the basic substratum of existence, the eternal, changeless reality of this universe, Brahman. And this is the subject matter which makes it very contemporary, because today there's so much research going on consciousness. It's called consciousness studies. There are a number of departments of consciousness studies in many universities around the world. And you can say this Vedanta constitutes the oldest science of consciousness, which was indigenously developed and which dives into, actually penetrates into the heart of human consciousness and what they understood about the human being, about the existential reality of life. This is what we find in the Vedanta. The Vedanta, as the word goes, it says the end of the Vedas, but it is not necessarily the end of each Veda, but the essence of each Veda. And technically, we define the Vedanta as Vedanta Nama Upanishad Pramanam Tad Upakarini Shariraka Sutradini, which means Vedanta is the evidence provided by the Upanishadic literature and supportive scriptures like Shariraka Sutras, which are the Brahma Sutras. Now, evidence regarding what? Regarding Brahman, regarding the ultimate reality of this universe, which is unchanging, which is of the nature of existence, consciousness, and bliss. About this reality, What is the evidence provided by the Vedic literature? That constitutes the Upanishads or the Vedanta. So Vedanta, another name for that is Upanishads. And it actually means sitting close to a teacher and getting this knowledge. This is the way the Vedas were transmitted. It was entirely an oral tradition. And that is why the Vedas are also called Shruti, which means that which is heard from the mouth of the teacher. And it was transmitted from guru to disciple, and when he had learnt it to his disciple, thus the knowledge of the Vedas were transmitted. Much later, they were compiled by Vyas into 4 Vedas, which you will be seeing now on a slide. Please see this slide. Here you can see each of the Vedas has 4 portions. The Samhita portion, the Aranyaka portion, the Brahmana, and the Upanishad. The Samhita constitutes mantras and rituals. The Aranyakas constitute sacrifices and mantras. The Brahmanas are commentaries on the Aranyakas, and the Upanishads constitute the knowledge or the philosophical portion of the Vedas. So the Upanishads are scattered all over the Vedas, throughout the Vedas, and this is how we find them. I would also like to show you the principal Upanishads or the major Upanishads. Please have a look at this slide. Though the Upanishads are many in number, more than 108 Upanishads we have scattered in the 4 Vedas, the most important or principal Upanishads, also called the major Upanishads, are 10 in number. So these are those Upanishads which have been commented upon by Shankaracharya, the 8th century AD philosopher who established Advait Vedanta. So he has commented extensively on these Upanishads, and that is why they are called the principal Upanishads. There are a number of minor Upanishads also. Now, what happened to this Vedic thought over the course of centuries? This Vedic thought gradually condensed into a number of philosophical systems, a number of philosophies. So by the time of 500 BCE till the time of 500 CE, it condensed into 6 philosophies. It crystallized into 6 philosophical systems, and these are what are called the Shad Darshanas. Shad means 6, Darshana means philosophy, but actually it means a window of insight into one aspect of truth. So this is how we find the Vedic thought crystallized into 6 philosophies. Please observe this slide. Here you can see the Shad Darshanas, and each darshana has a particular theme. So you can say, like Nyaya Vaisheshika, Nyaya was more about logic. Each of these darshanas has one particular theme upon which a number of sutras are based. All of them were discovered, realized by rishis, and they have constructed this into a philosophical system, as it were. So Sankhya and Yoga are further related. Yoga is all about Yoganushasanam, attaining the state of yoga, the state of union with the Supreme through definite techniques, starting from mind management to transcending mind. Then you have the Purva Mimamsa and Uttar Mimamsa. Purva Mimamsa constitutes Dharma Jignasa primarily, that is the laws of righteous living, the laws of karma, how the karma kanda was performed at that time, the duties of man. And the most important part of the Shad Darshan is this, the last portion, what is called Uttar Mimamsa, which is actually also called Vedanta Darshan. It primarily deals with what is called Brahma Jignasa, inquiry into the real nature of Brahman, the ultimate reality of this universe. So, this scripture, this portion of the philosophy is actually providing us a logical backup for the philosophy of the Upanishads. The primary scripture of Uttar Mimamsa is Brahma Sutras, which were composed by Badarayan, and they primarily deal with establishing the reality of Brahman as the ultimate truth of this universe. So, the Upanishadic thought crystallized into all of these philosophies. The cream of these philosophies is, of course, the Brahma Sutras, and because primarily they are dealing with this ultimate reality that the Upanishads are speaking of, Brahma Jignasa, inquiry into the nature of Brahman. Now, what are the pre-qualifications to enter into Vedant? We will just pay a little attention into this and enter into the heart of Vedant straight away. A number of primary qualifications were recommended in order to understand, grasp, and intuit the purport or the meaning, the import of the Upanishadic passages. So, this is classified under what is called Sadhan Chatushtay, which means a fourfold discipline which was expected of the pupil who came to learn the Upanishad from the Guru. So, the first of these qualifications is what is called Vivek. The second is Vairagya. The third is a group of 6 qualities called Shat Sampatti. And the fourth is Mumukshutvam. Vivek is, as we know, it is philosophical discrimination, discriminating between the real and the unreal. Vairagya is the ability to stick to what we have known to be real, to bring our entire energy into realizing what we have known to be real. The Shat Sampatti includes a group of 6 qualities, 6 virtues, which are very important for Vedantic knowledge. The first of this is Shama, which means deep calmness of mind, Dhamma, control of the senses, Uparati, turning the mind inwards, not allowing it to flow with the senses. Then Titiksha, Titiksha is great forbearance, ability to bear the dualities of life so that we can give our energies to the penetration into the truths taught by Vedant, and we don't remain engaged just in the dualities of life. The fifth important is one is Shraddha. Shraddha is actually a positive, affirmative state of mind. Shankaracharya calls it Astikya Buddhi, which means a positive state of mind where you are able to accept reality as it is. This is Shraddha. And then finally we have what is called Samadhan, which means focus or concentration. So all these qualities are required if we would penetrate into Vedant. The last Sadhan Chatushtay, the last qualification required is Mumukshutvam, or what is called desire for liberation. This is not just desire for liberation from our conditioned compulsive thought process, but an actual desire to come out of this conditioning, this compulsiveness, and come out of our bondage, our ignorance, and get the real knowledge of the self. So this Mumukshutvam is a precondition for Vedantic knowledge. So all of these constitute the fourfold discipline, Sadhan Chatushtay, which is required for us to dive into Vedant. Now, the common question asked about Vedanta is how practical is it? It is the most practical thing possible because what is Vedanta researching into primarily? About the reality of your being. It is a research into the core of your I consciousness, the import of your I sense. How can it not be practical? How can one not be interested in this is what I would ask. So for this to become a reality, what is usually prescribed in Vedanta is Vedanta Vichar, a kind of analytical technique, actually a series of techniques which turn the mind inward and help us to understand Vedantic truth through analysis, very rationally, very scientifically. So this is called Vedanta Vichar, which we translate as existential inquiry, an inquiry into the very nature of existence. And this anyone can do it at any point of time, anywhere. Because you see, the very nature of Vedic truth, Vedantic truth, is that it is of the nature of a revelation. Truth always is there. If I prepare my mind, it opens up to me. That is all. That is why Vivekananda used the word realization and revelation. It is not an invention or a creation. It is a realization. Realization itself means truth is already there. If I open myself to it, I now find it here, right here. I don't create truth. So, this is the meaning of existential inquiry, an analytical process which will take you into Vedantic truth directly. So, here I would like to give you some of these pointers which we use in existential inquiry, which are scattered in our scriptures, which will show you the reality of the subject matter of the Upanishads. They are trying to tell you that the heart of truth lies in consciousness. In fact, you yourself are that consciousness, embodied, expressing itself through a body-mind complex. So if you ask the question, who am I? Using a particular technique like this, you will go directly into self-knowledge. Let me give you a few pointers here. One important pointer which even now you can feel the reality of it is, see, our sense of I remains unchanged throughout our life. Have you observed this? Although the mind and the body change so much throughout our life, the I sense is continuous, unfluctuating. It is the, you can say, a continuum throughout your existence. But body and mind keep changing. If I showed you a picture of yourself as a baby, perhaps you would not recognize it, but your mother would recognize it. You have changed that much. The body has completely changed, the mind has changed completely, but you are that same baby. The same I sense prevails. You were a baby, then you were a toddler, then a teenager, now a young person, maybe getting on in years, but the same I has persisted, although at every stage body and mind has changed so much. So there is a sense of changelessness about us. There is a sense of continuity about us. That is why Vedanta says consciousness is a continuum. The states of your mind change. The identification with the body, with the world of objects will keep changing. But you yourself, your true being, is changeless. It is infinite. It is untouched by time, unpunctuated by space. It is ever present. It is infinite in nature. It is consciousness. And primarily, you only feel aware. Have you noticed this fact about this I sense? See, how do we understand the import of this I? You are always aware. In that awareness, there is a thought process through which you identify with the body and with the world of objects. These may change, but the I sense in you, the awareness, is always a constant, ever present. The rest are intermittent, coming and going through the process of thought. But awareness is fundamental even to the thought process. If you, I can give you the simple example of a selfie. See, when you click a selfie and you are now watching your selfie, what is exactly happening? Who is watching what? Your mind is watching your body. Your intellect is acknowledging your mind watching your body. But this whole process is happening in your awareness. Fundamentally, you are that awareness. And the mind and the body are like tools in your hands through which you perceive this world of objects. So this is what Vedanta is primarily telling you. You are always fundamentally aware. This is everybody's experience, which is so obvious it goes unexplored. You know, recently I was teaching existential inquiry to a class of PG students. And for 1 hour, they heard this Vedanta Vichar. And then one boy stood up and told me, Mataji, what you are telling is so obvious. It is so true. The only problem is nobody told us this so far in this manner. If they had told us this earlier in our childhood, our very perception of ourselves would have changed. And hence our perspective of the world would have changed. So this is what Vedanta Vichar does for you. It changes your concept of yourself. You understand this fundamental fact, which is present even before your conceptualization, that awareness is fundamental even to the thought process. And everything is objective to that awareness. See, now if I suddenly asked you your age, you would have to think to remember your age. You never feel your age. You only feel aware at any given moment of time. But when the thought process comes in, through the thought process, you concoct or conceptualize something and identify with it, like your age, for example. But awareness never ages. That is why your own feeling of yourself is always one of awareness, and only through the thought process you can detect your age. So there are a number of clues like this through which you can know the reality of what this Vedanta is talking about. The self, the Atman within us, the what is called the soul, or the very source of our existence, is eternal, unchanging. It is always a constant. It's a continuum, in fact. And it is the witness of everything. It is self-luminous by itself. Everything else is objective to it. And it is the very source of our conscious experience. This Atman, this pure being, this constitutes the real nature of man. This is what the Vedanta is pointing out towards. That is why you see it is a complete science of consciousness in itself. A number of such clues and pointers are scattered in the Upanishads to introduce you to yourself, to introduce you to your own being. And that is the value of this literature. Let me give you one more important pointer. See, you are aware of the objective world. Look around you, you are aware of the objects in your room. You are aware of yourself being present in this room. You are aware of this body, isn't it? If I raise my hand, I am aware that I have raised my hand. I am aware of the thoughts in my mind, but it's not the other way around. The objects in my room are not aware of me. I raised my hand, I am aware of the hand, my hand is not aware of me. My thoughts are not aware of me, which means awareness belongs to me, the subject, which is quite apart from object. And all these are objects in my experience. It includes the world of objects, my body, as well as my mind. See, just now we are thinking Vedanta. You are aware of the thoughts in your mind. Your thoughts are not aware of you, which means awareness belongs to the subject, I, and everything else is objective to my experience. How we manage to mix up these two is a real puzzle. But this is our existential experience at any given point of time. You are the perfect witness of the presence of thought, of the absence of thought, of the presence of objects, of the absence of objects. You are the witness of your identifications. You are the witness of the absence of identification. It's your choice what you choose to identify with through your thought process. But awareness is most fundamental, unchanging. It is the substratum behind your thought process. So you see, you are that awareness. It is not that I have an Atman. I am the Atman functioning through a body and mind. I am Brahman. The import of the I is Brahman, pure consciousness. So this is Vedanta. It takes you directly into the heart of reality. Let me give you another pointer. The fact of our memory. Please observe and see. Whenever you remember something, a preceding event is being recollected presently. So there must be a constant factor between the preceding event and the succeeding event, isn't it? There must be a common factor. Otherwise, how do you know that is your memory? So this has been pointed out in the Brahma Sutras. The fact of memory itself shows the immutability of the cognizer. You were present between both these events. That is why you have memory of an event. So this shows the continuity of your being. You are never absent as awareness. You are always the witness of everything. But you tend to identify with the thought process, and that creates a whole lot of confusion in the mind as to the nature of reality. But in your own experience, always you are apart from the body mind complex. You are the witness consciousness, the self. Let me give you one more pointer. See, we have a body which functions in parts. All of our vital organs, they are functioning independent of our will and functioning like a machine by themselves, isn't it? Does our heart take our permission to beat? Or the liver or the lungs, are they functioning with our permission? No. The Creator made the vital organs independent and not under our will, not subservient to our will. Knowing how we are, He kept them independent completely. So, like an instrument, it is going on. And we have no actual control over it. But still, we think, although it's all functioning in parts, a human being actually lives in parts and dies in degrees. But we have this tendency to think, I am one composite whole. Because the fact is, you are a composite whole in awareness. Your awareness is a whole, wholesome thing. The rest of you, your body, your thoughts, the vital organs in your system, the different faculties of the mind, they all function in parts. So the actual wholeness, the sense of continuity within us is only contributed by consciousness, pure awareness, which is the Atman. That is why you feel you are a composite whole. And you don't feel like you are in parts. So this is another huge pointer. Finally, let me give you this another important pointer or clue from the Mandukya Upanishad, which we will be dwelling upon as we go on in these sessions. But here in this Mandukya Upanishad, in a very masterly way, they are using data which is available to us in our everyday experience and coming to the arriving at the truth of the Atman. How they do this is they analyze the three states of everyday experience: Jagrat, Swapna, and Sushupti. The waking state, the dream state, and the deep sleep state. Now, the waking state, this is the state when our senses are fully active, the mind also is fully active. Both of them are blooming, as it were. And the waker experiences the world of objects through an active mind and active senses. In the next state, which is called the dream state, when you get tired, you fall asleep, and then you go into a dream state. Please see this. The senses are inactive, but the mind is active, the subconscious mind, and it spins up a whole world which we totally believe in. Until you get up from your dream, you do not doubt it is a dream. You feel it is reality. And what a reality you spin for yourself. You see, it is you yourself who's doing it. And you are part of that reality. You are very much there. And you don't doubt it. Now, this dreamer, Taijasa, he is called. He lights up his own dream, isn't it? What is the light with which you see the dream? It is the light of awareness. And you completely believe that to be like a waking state. You are completely involved in the dream which you have spun. So this is the second state. You are also able to tell about the dream once you get up. The third state, which is called Sushupti, is even more interesting. You see, this is a state where the senses have shut down, deep sleep state. The senses are shut down, the mind is also shut down. And yet you have had an experience in this dream, which is the common universal experience of humankind. What is it? We all say, I slept happily like a log and I did not know anything. Sukhamaham asvapsam na kinchid vedisham. the Upanishad says, which means I slept happily, restfully, and I did not know anything in this state. Now, who knew that he did not know? Who was present to detect the absence of objective experience? So the Upanishad says this is actually an experience of absence of objects. It is not an absence of experience. You were present, and that is why you know that you didn't experience anything objectively. So you see, you are able to say something even when the mind is shut down, which means awareness ever persists. You can catch this not merely as an inference, but with a little amount of training. This can be actually caught in the deep sleep state even. The fact of your awareness is never absent. And that is why you are able to say something about all the three states. So an invariable, as it were, has passed through three variables. The three states are variables, Jagrat, Swapna and Sushupti. But the Atman there is the invariable, the self, the unchanging witness of all the three states. Or rather, you can say the three states passed over the Atman. So this is the underlying reality of consciousness, which we miss out because of the overactivity of our minds. We miss out the fact of the self. In all these techniques, in all these ways, the Upanishad is trying to bring us back into the original state of our being, to show us this is what you actually are. And the body and mind are the instruments you use. You are not the body and mind, they are the instruments you use. You are essentially the self, the Atman. So you see, what a marvelous way of coming back to our original state of reality. This is provided by the Vedanta. That is why this is such precious literature. And practically, if you ask me, the Vedanta itself is a source of great freedom, strength, and happiness. It is the source of freedom because it makes you free from existential bondage. Vivekananda used to say, freedom is the watchword of the Upanishads. Not just freedom, it is not giving you the kind of freedom which youngsters today understand, the freedom of the senses. It is freedom from the senses itself. It is freedom from the conditioned, compulsive mind. It is freedom from bondage and ignorance. It ushers you into the state of complete liberation of mind. This is the spiritual freedom which the Vedanta gives you. It gives you immense strength. You are empowered from within. Once you know you are the unchanging principle of consciousness, you know how beautifully you can handle the body-mind complex without identification. The body and mind definitely belong to us. It belongs to me, but I am not the body and mind. It gives you this sense. So it empowers you, strengthens you from within. Vivekananda used to say, the Upanishads are the infinite mine of strength, and in them lies strength enough to invigorate the whole world. So this is the glory of the Upanishads, and they give you a taste of pure bliss, real happiness, not the synthetic joys of the senses, which are made up in order to keep the mind engaged. This is original joy streaming out from within, because it is the joy born of consciousness. At some point, we will all understand this, that happiness is nothing but an exponential function of your awareness. And the more aware you are from within, the more happy you will be, obviously. Collectively, Vedanta has brought to us the inclusive vision of unity of all existence, because this is what is perceived as a result of Vedantic understanding, Vedantic realization. You perceive the oneness of all existence. That is why we had principles like Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family, Yatra Vishwam Bhavati Ekanidam, Mahanarayan Upanishad, the whole world is nestled in one nest, as it were. It gives us this all-inclusive vision of one family, as it were. All of humankind is one family. So this equality, unity, oneness of existence is directly related to the perception of this unitary consciousness, what is called Brahman in the Upanishads. And this is actually the source of values. When you see oneness everywhere, you actually tend to see yourself in the other person, and thus begins values. So it is far reaching, the effect, the implications of the Vedanta philosophy. Finally, let me conclude by saying it is also very modern and appealing to the scientific mind. What do we call modern today? That which is pan human, trans ethnic, universal, scientific, and all inclusive. All of these factors are present in Vedanta. It is pan human, it is a science of consciousness, it is trans ethnic, it is universal, it is all inclusive, and it's scientific. So, the more we are able to grasp it and penetrate into it, the more we elevate human life. This is the power of Vedanta. I would like to end this session here. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace.